upgrade.
Do we need to turn it all off and start over?
Nope. We're not going to start it over, y'all. Y'all just hang tight. Let's stop that one and start that one. Here we go. Are we on yet? Man, what a... There we go. We are on the air, dude.
Woohoo.
Welcome back. Look at us. Look at us here. Thank y'all for joining us in the... If you're out there, let us know you're watching. I'm going to try to pull up the chat so we can see what all you guys are saying to us, but I can't read. I absolutely can't read. There we go.
Do it there.
Well, but this will catch all of them too. Man, I hope they're out there. Hope you're watching. See, this is what happens when I start trying to use a little bit of different technology to get it just right. And I think it's all working. And then you come in and it doesn't work. Here's what we're going to do today. We're, again, still responding to some of the questions that got sent in that we've been talking about. Last week, we talked about supporting your spouse. And we were over in the kitchen last week. Now we're back in the studio. But today, we're going to talk about what it looks like. The question was, let me give the question, and then, because if you don't hear the question, our answers might not sound like they're actually addressing the question. But one of the things Tim and I talk about a lot is what Paul did in 1 Corinthians. A lot of times we have these good questions. They're the right questions, but I say they're good questions, but they're not always the right question. And the answers to our specific questions can lead us down paths that we really probably don't need to be going in that sense. But the question was, how do you trust God together making big decisions in marriage? And I wish that had a really simple answer, don't you?
Well, sometimes it does have a simple answer. Sometimes it doesn't.
Well, and I think, one of the things, if you've listened to the podcast very often, you'll understand from us is we say it depends a lot. I think it depends on a lot of things. I was speaking last Sunday and I was talking last night about making disciples. Sunday, I was talking about how part of the Great Commission is that we all make disciples. That's what we're called to do, not just the preacher, not just the elder, not just the podcast people. And then last night, I was talking about some very practical thing. How does that work? How do you do that? Last night was Wednesday. And, how do you make that happen? And one of the first things I said, because people are always like, well, I can't make disciples. I don't know anything. Or I've only been doing this for a little bit of time. And the point that I was making was, if you realize that about yourself, as it were, then your first step is to become a disciple. You've got to get to a place where, even a little bit, that you have somebody you're following or learning from, even if it's your own Bible walk and the Holy Spirit, that you can then help somebody step into. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't want to wait on that necessarily, but I mean, that's I don't know anything. Well, go learn something.
Yeah.
Start looking, pursuing, and not with an end in mind, but a process. It's a process in mind. You got to start walking. The question about how do I trust God together, and we're probably going to just tell some anecdotes and tell some stories from our own lives. I mean, at least that's kind of where I wanted to head was. It's like, I think of like professional ball players and things. There's a lot of work that goes into how they perform during a game that has nothing to do with the game. I mean, they're in the gym, working out, whatever. There's some things you kind of got to get squared away in your own mind before you're ever going to tackle a big decision together in marriage. What? Tim had a thought.
No, it's
an epiphany?
No. For some reason, I'm tired today. My brain's working on that. Anyway, keep going.
Well, we have some talking points here. We've got some verses that we want to read and will read. What we want to avoid, though, is we don't ever want to give this misconception or this idea that there's one answer only. If you'll just do this, your marriage is going to be fine, your decisions will all be good, and they're all going to work out. That's just not how this thing works. And I guess part of what we want to do when we answer these questions is not just say, oh, you want to know how to make decisions in marriage and how to trust God. Well, this is what you do. X, Y, Z, 1, 2, 3, you do that and you'll be fine. It just simply, we want to reframe the question and the reality of what's happening to better address how this kind of stuff works out in real life.
Well, there is an answer to the question. And that is, it's Christ and him crucified. The practical aspect of that is everything that we're talking about right now, is that when things are really going south, even when decisions have to be made to make something transpire, sometimes the answer is I really don't know how to stare God in the face, but I have to go spend time there.
Right.
And you may not even want to. But there's nowhere else to find an answer. And I say that because that is the answer in these places. We're not, almost said we're not really built, but that's not true. We think we're not built to go seek God when I have no clue what to do or how to do it or where to go. We feel like we're built to solve the issue at hand, and we may have a great answer in our head and a great way to go, but the other side of that table may be seeing it in a whole different function, which stops the movement, which causes more difficulty and frustration.
Well, and I guess one of the things that, and you're going to see this pattern throughout all these viewer questions that we respond to, is you're right. We are wired as a culture. We are wired as a country, as a people, as the church. It's just who we are to solve the problems. And because we're wired that way, one tactic of the enemy to get us off of what we're really built for is just to keep throwing tasks and problems at us that we feel like we need to solve. And it keeps us busy.
I tell you, it's your responsibility.
Yeah, and it'll get us in a path where we forget what we're actually supposed to be doing, which is pursuing the Lord and becoming more like Him and transformed into His image. We had several verses written down here. Number one was Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. And when you start looking at them, it feels like a very cookie cutter approach to things. It says, all right, what do? You just got to trust the Lord. Trust the Lord with all your heart. Do not rely on your own understanding. In all your ways, know Him, and He will make your path straight. It's super simple to read that and go, oh, if I just trust the Lord, then everything's going to be okay. He'll tell me exactly what I'm supposed to do, and it's going to work out right. If you take that at just kind of face value, and you don't run it through the lens of what does God actually do when He works with His people.
Well, that's part of it. So, I mean, it says it right in there, don't lean into your own understanding. That's the only understanding I know. In all your ways, know Him. That's an active statement.
Yeah.
That's not one as I go by the way, all of a sudden I go, oh, there it is. I mean, it's a deliberate, active movement.
Yes.
And we don't want to do that. And he says, and He will make your path straight. And as He's making those paths straight, that's where you're looking at Him going, that's not the straight I want to make it. I mean, all of that is combined together.
And that's a good point, because when people read that passage, typically what they translate that to is, I get to decide what a straight path looks like.
Yeah.
People read that with, if I'll just trust the Lord with all my heart, He's going to help me down the path that I have chosen. That is not what it's saying. That's not what He's wanting to do. If you trust the Lord with all your heart and don't rely on your own, and there's a reason He says don't rely on your own understanding, because our own understanding is going to freak out when we see the circumstances around us sometimes that He's actually inviting us into.
Yeah.
You know, you hear people say things and it's kind of tried and overstretched and overdone, but sometimes people, you hear them like, well, God wants us to be happy. Doesn't God want us to prosper? Well, no, unless prospering and happiness means growing in our relationship with Him and becoming more like Him. If that's what that means, then yeah, absolutely. And so when we trust in the Lord, it says, and you brought it out, in all your ways to know Him. I actually like the ESV and the King James better too. In all your ways acknowledge Him, meaning that our face is towards Him in all of our ways. It would be the equivalent of saying that I want to be a professional basketball player, but I never want to go to practice. I just want to show up and play. Well, it doesn't work that way. And we know intuitively it doesn't work that way. But in marriage and in life, we get down to it and we're like, I'll lean on the Lord when I get to the problem. I'll start acknowledging all of His ways, and I'll bend myself to Him when I get in a jam. And what He's saying, no, if you want to learn how to trust God together in marriage and strive forward together as a couple, it's got to be normative practice in your heart, your mind, and your life to be seeking Him for trust when you're not in a crisis.
Yeah, so when we're talking to people that are Christian couples, because if you're both trying to figure out what that is and do it, I mean, all that causes its own difficulties, and I don't really mean that in a bad way. But there are what the Bible calls unyoked marriages, or I guess the King James would call it that, where you have an unbelieving spouse.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that all this is necessarily going to go south. They may get saved because of it. But if you just take it to its extremes, one doesn't believe, not going to believe, and the other one does believe and wants to believe, I mean, you can just automatically see that there's going to be some kind of difficulties inside all that. And the Bible has several places where we see things like that. You would think it in a Christian sense be just, oh, the Bible's great and true, and all the people it talks about are all knowing and all that, and that's what I want to aspire to. Well, you're reading more into it than what's there, because Moses' wife, I think her name was Zipporah, I wouldn't say that she was against Moses and his calling and all that stuff, but she sure didn't agree with how he did some things on one form or another. And you see confrontations in there. Matt and I were talking about what this conversation may look like. So we look at Job. Him and his wife had some
impassioned discussions.
Well, yeah, and it's easy to look at that, and she looks at him after all this tragedy's taken place. All of his kids got killed, his house got wiped out. I mean, everything was a
wreck.
It was as tragic as you can get, and she didn't get hurt physically, and evidently she knew that he was looking at God and praising the Lord over all this, and out of frustration, she's like, why don't you just, and he's sitting there sick, he's covered in boils, why don't you just curse God and die?
What a wonderfully supportive woman.
Well, but that's what I'm saying. We can read that and go, oh, well, she's evil and causing him problems. No, the woman was as tragically destroyed as Job was. And say, well, Job was the real Christian and she wasn't, evidently. I don't even know that I would go to that. At one time I would have.
Well, and I guess part of what I in regard to that, and even when addressing these passages, we're wired, like we said, for an answer. Even when we read stories like Job and Job's wife, we're wired to decipher, are they in or are they out? Are they good or are they bad? We have this really strong black and white dichotomy of how we think things are supposed to fit into normative stuff.
Yeah.
What that doesn't do for us is deal with situations like David, who was an adulterous, conniving murderer, who was called a man after God's own heart and went on to be blessed by the Lord, even after his repentance from doing all that stuff. How is it that God reconciles? God doesn't seem to, in the scriptures, live and operate in this black and white in or out deal.
Yeah.
He operates in, do you look like me yet or not? And that's about the only dichotomy that you have, and the answer is always not yet, because we're not completed yet. We're still sinful. And so all of the stuff that's in front of us, and if you're married, you're looking at, and specifically the question was about big decisions and not just necessarily about hitting tragedy. How do you trust God in deciding whether or not we take this job, that job, we have children, we buy this house? Those are big decisions. How do you trust God together in those things? And I would just assert to you that it's the exact same way that you trust God through tragedy.
And the little things.
And the little things.
Because if you're not trusting him doing the little things too, this is part of the working the thing out.
Right.
If you're not used to dealing with just the little stuff, I used to think that was stupid. I heard people say, I get up in the morning, I pray, and I ask God, what shoes should I wear today, or what pants? And I roll my eyes and go, well, nowadays I look at that and I think, I wish I was that close that I would want to ask that question.
Well, we were talking last night about one of the steps of being a disciple is the spiritual disciplines, and you can boil that down to, if I just do these things and I'm good. It's not about that. It's about the process of doing, and one of them is prayer. And Paul says to pray without ceasing. Well, what the heck does that mean? That means walking through your day going, man, I sure would like to have a parking place right now, Lord, that's not so far away because my knee's hurting. Or, man, I missed that wreck over there. Thank you, Lord, for sparing me in that. Or, man, this hamburger is really good. Thank you, Lord. This was really a good experience.
Yeah.
And when you finally get to the place that those things aren't juvenile to you, it's the same sort of a thing you would do with a friend or a spouse. You're like, oh, dude, man, I love that shirt. It looks good. What'd you do with your hair? You didn't do anything with your hair. But, that sort of a thing. It's literally that infinitesimal little things of the relationship that when the problems hit. I mean, you've been in the military. I have not. But I hear stories from people, and you'll attest to this, I know, because we've talked about it, that there's something happens to a relationship when you've been in battle with somebody. There's a bond, and that process or that function happens in marriage. It happens in families. When you've been through tragedy together, when you've been through hardship together, there's a bond that gets forged. One of the reasons Tim and I are such good friends is because we've been through some junk together. Yeah. And survived it and leaned on each other and rattled each other's cage on occasion. But that's really not where, that's where maybe the friendship was solidified, but it begins to get forged in much more docile and mundane ways. I got a book back here called The God of the Mundane. And as a couple, if you're not trusting God in keeping the lights on or, making you the kind of person that can get up and go to work tomorrow, then when tragedy strikes or when there's a big decision to be made, it's not like all of a sudden you're going to be able to pull the get out of jail free card and all of a sudden you've got the tool. Yeah. Now, will he honor you if you go to him? Sure he will. But that little phrase, in all your ways know him, is vital to being able to trust the Lord with all your heart.
Yeah, it's even the bad stuff when you're going, I'm such an idiot. Express that to the Lord. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. That's not the point. It's being able to see what maybe you've done or even just a circumstance that's going south. Learning to be able to look at the Lord and say, show me how to work this thing out, or what do we do here? Or it's the same thing as being grateful for everything that transpires.
Well, exactly. And when he says he'll make your path straight, I told the people last night, if you'll just pursue the Lord, you can't screw it up. We tell people that when we do Bible study training. You can't screw it up. Oh, you mean I'll never interpret anything wrong. No, you probably will. But that's not screwing it up.
Yeah.
You mean I might go left when God wanted me to go right? Maybe. But you know what? If you're still pursuing him and you maybe go the wrong direction, what happens in that he'll make your way straight, your path straight, is he can take all your screw ups and at the end of it all, he's going to get you where you want to be, where he wants you to be, is what I mean to say. He's going to complete in you and I what he wants to complete in you and I, regardless of some of the decisions we make, so long as we're pursuing him and knowing his ways. And because when it doesn't seem to be going right, we can go, hey, I don't know why this is turning out the way it is, but I trust him. And sometimes we just need to say that out loud to each other and to him. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know
no,
what's
that's
happening.
That happens quite often.
You know, I don't know what's going on here, but I know you're good and I know you're righteous and I know that you're holy and I know you love me. And so I'm going to trust you. We do that with our kids all the time and we expect them to trust us. You're not going to understand this right now, son or daughter. One day you will. You know, we do that all the time and it makes sense. And he's doing it to us every day of our lives. I just want you to trust us.
Well, that's actually how we were built to live.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look before Adam and Eve did what Adam and Eve did, the whole mindset was completely different. We were built to be completely dependent
Yes.
on God and almost a loose mind. It just never occurred to you that he was not there and that he was not doing what he was doing. The other side of that is we like to beat up Adam and Eve, but as I looked all through, I think scriptural history is history. There's probably plenty of places in there that in one form or another, that same thing probably would have transpired. And I don't really know what that looks like, but I just, Adam and Eve just basically decided that they liked what they saw and it was appeasing to them. And they wanted to make the kingdom how they wanted to see it done.
Yeah.
And what that did is that broke that dependence and God fixed it.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is we're caught in that dichotomy. So when you start pursuing the word, even if you have to pursue the word, I mean, like you're forcing yourself to do it, all that inflow is worth something. It's doing something. And then you're, at least for me, all the things we're talking about, you know, now I'm like going, oh man, thank you, Lord. That was really cool. Or I have no clue how I'm going to deal with this or how this is going to work out, Lord. Show me how to have a faithful heart. Show me how to, whatever transpires out of this thing, whether it's complete loss or it works out, help me keep my face and my eyes on you. I do those things not because I'm supposed to do them now. I do them because after all this stuff that I've learned and touched and all that stuff, it's real to me.
Right.
And I know it's messed up by my own hand or just circumstance. Those things are the things that you have to work on. And if both of you are Christians, work on that, being able to do that together, to acknowledge the things of the kingdom, regardless of the situation that's at hand. And that will help transpire to make things, I even hate to say work it out or smooth it out or whatever, but that's learning to be dependent on him and whatever is transpiring, because he is the man.
Well, and part
to
of it
speak.
for me too is changing the way that we look at what it means for it to be worked out.
Well, and that's the word. I think that's the working out your salvation
with fear and trembling
right there, because we all do things about how we think it works and what it's supposed to be. And that's one of the things that he does. He changes that. That's making the path straight.
Yeah.
That's not the way, that's not straight over there. This is straight over here or getting closer. Are you willing to bend that or not?
Well, and there's a couple of things at play here that you have to learn to become comfortable with, and it's a learned, intentional thing. The first is being comfortable with whatever outcome he brings you. That's a decision that you make ahead of a big decision. It's either going to work out or it's not in the way that we want. It's either going to go our way or it's not. And either way is fine, because I know that my Father loves me and he's going to take me in a direction that he wants me to go. And when you, as far as getting into decision making, somewhere along the line, people have convinced us in our church culture that God always and forever, every time, has this providential path for you to drive down or to walk down or to go down in your decision making process. And if you screw that up, the whole thing's off the rails. You know, but I will invite you to go back to the book of Genesis and see what did he tell Adam and Eve in this perfect environment.
Yeah.
The relationship with the Lord, the spiritual realm, the physical realm are one. There's no separation. Before the fall, everything's good. The mandate that came out in Genesis was be fruitful, multiply amongst the earth, and subdue it. A lot of people think that the only reason that the rest of the earth came into play was because they got kicked out of the garden. That's not true.
No, 'cause
The
that mandate came before all that
came
happened.
before the fall.
Yeah.
And so from the very beginning, God's will was for Adam and Eve to take the relationship with God and spread it throughout the whole earth. But he didn't tell them how to do that.
Yeah.
There's a thing in there called the cultural mandate to go and build cities, go make art, go do all these things. But he didn't say make this kind, build the city like this. There was great latitude in what he told them to do. And as a married couple, I think there's great latitude in what decisions we make. Where does God want me to live? The thing you have to get in your head is there may be a direct path and a specific path he wants you to go. That may be. Open yourself up to that. But by and large, he's sitting back going, I don't care where you live. Just pursue me wherever you're at.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth in that.
And so we get frustrated with, do I make this decision, go this way or that way? And we get all consternated on getting it right. And the whole time he's going, do you really think that I'm so limited that if you pick left, I can't deal with it? Or if you pick right, which job do I take? Well, why don't you take one that pays your bills? That'd be a good idea. You know, or and I even apply this to marriage, and people kind of get freaked out about it, but I'm like, okay, what person should I marry? A woman, if you're a guy. A guy, if you're a girl. That's a believer. And beyond that, it's pretty wide open.
Yeah.
I mean, then you get down into personalities and preference, and you know what? Pick who you want. It's your life that he's giving you reign over.
Yeah.
Now, how do I live out that big decision before him? Well, before you say I do, you better be on your face, seeking the face of God and saying, you need to make me, regardless of who I say I do to, I need to be the kind of person that can handle this. I need to be like Jesus. I need to be acting like him. So it's not even so much about the decision. It's about, am I going to live out who Jesus is in whatever decision it is that I make? Does that make sense?
And if you're already in the middle of a marriage and you didn't do all that, do it now.
Do it now. Start where you
There
are.
ain't nothing that he ain't, I almost said can make right. He is making it right.
Right.
He's making all of it right. And that's not by our vision and grasp. It's by his. So that's a whole nother conversation. I don't know, this might have been better last week than it is this week. But I mean, you're going to run into stuff, right? So I'll give you a little testimony here. I used to work at Texas Instruments, and I worked these 12-hour shifts. We'd work 3 days one week, 3 days the next, and I worked at night. So I lived in Dallas 3 days one week and 4 days the next week. My parents lived up there, so I'd stay at their house. And there was this girl that I was working with at work, right? And we had similar thoughts and chemistries and all that stuff, and the process that we did was complex. And so we were able to make that a science. It worked really well. It was kind of cool. And I don't know, this went on for a few months. And so I'd drive home at the end of whatever my work week was, whether it was the 3-day work week or the 4-day work week. When I'd get off work, so I've been up all night and I'm driving home. Well, one day I'm driving home, and I don't know if you ever had to drive in a condition like that, but when you had been up all night long, sometimes it gets a little difficult. You're rolling down the window and sticking your head out like a dog,
Yeah.
just trying to stay awake. I caught myself thinking what life would be like with that other girl,
Oh boy.
and it scared me. So I didn't even drive home. I drove straight over to Dan Daniels' house. And I told him all about it. And Dan was like, "You got to quit."
Yeah.
Well, that would have caused a whole lot of other issues at hand, but I did. I went back. I can't remember that day, or anyway, I went back to my boss. It was that day or the next day or something, and I said, "Yeah, I don't know if you're gonna understand this or not, but I got to go." And he said he was a Christian. And when I told him what happened, he was like, "Yeah, I could tell y'all were getting kind of tight in there." Of course, my knee-jerk reaction was, "Why didn't you say something about it?" That didn't really have anything to do with anything. But anyway, so I quit cold turkey, and how we were going to survive and all that stuff, because we weren't making tons of money. Anyway, I had to go home and tell my wife this, right?
Oh boy.
And she's big and pregnant. And I thought, this is probably wishful thinking, but I was thinking, she's going to be so proud of me, because when I realized it, off it went, all that stuff, she's going to say, "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry." Well, when I told her, that's not what I got. She just sat there and stared at me for minutes, and just basically got up and walked off in the bedroom. And so I was kind of mad at God about that, right? I did everything right. I did what I was supposed to, all that kind of stuff. And you could say, well, if she was farther along in her walk, she would have responded the way I was thinking she should have responded. You can second guess that to death. But the point was, is there was some struggle there, right?
Yeah.
Not to mention the fact that we were going to run out of money, and she was like real pregnant, like on the doorstep of having this kid, and all the other stuff going through her head, that I'm this big pregnant wife, my husband don't want me. I mean, all kinds of stuff went through her head. This is all way after the fact. So why tell that story? Because we both believed in the Lord, and we both wanted, I did do the things right. When I realized what I was doing, man, I took off to go get counsel. And so those things were right and good. That doesn't mean that she needed to respond a certain way in that deal. And what was happening, that's the thing where, and he will make your paths straight. He's showing you what the straight paths really are through those kind of adversities and functions and stuff. It's not about patting you on the back and say, "Oh, son, you did a good job there." We ain't to that place yet.
Yeah.
So what does a perfect heart look like? A perfect heart is somebody that's willing to go through, because I could have tossed my hands up and said, "You know what? I did what I was supposed to, and I got screwed over for it. So you know what? Fine. I'm just going to go do what I want to do."
That would have been a disaster.
Well, those are the decisions that come up in those things, though. That's where you get to either go be Cain, or you get to be Paul.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Well, and when we think about how do I trust God together in a big decision, our brain immediately goes to things like, should we buy a house? Should we move? Very, in the scope of spiritual things, just irrelevant in events. If you want to move,
Yeah, I don't mean it ugly, but they are irrelevant.
They're irrelevant in the context of learning to be like Jesus.
Yeah.
And I guess the thing is because you can make all the plans and do all the things right that you want. And one of the things Tim is talking about is, and the next minute you can be living in Appalachia and the hurricane comes through and wipe your whole village, your whole community off the map. What are you going to do with your plans then? Doesn't matter. You can be living in Los Angeles and everything's burned down to the ground. What about your plans now? And so those things come and go, and those decisions and the ramifications of them will come and go. It's the eternal spiritual things that you've got to get your head around early on if you can, and if you're already in it and work today, start now. Getting your head around the eternal things of purposing in your heart. I love those phrases that it talks about Jesus. You know, he turned his face toward Jerusalem before he was, what's his name? Daniel purposed in his heart
Yeah.
not to be defiled by the king's meat. Those aren't just Bible stories. They're great examples of
Yes.
he had already made the decision in his heart before God, regardless of a consequence, I'm going to do this thing. As a couple, you can live like that. You can say, you know what? I don't know what the ultimate ramifications of this are going to be, but we're going to honor the Lord in this thing or that thing. You and Margie had made a decision that y'all were going to figure out marriage
Yeah.
ahead of time. So you hit a bump in the road. You dealt with it the best you can. She dealt with it the best that she could. You're still married today, right?
Yeah.
That's been a long time ago. Those are the big decisions that I would say put the most of your energy into.
Yeah.
In how you're going to relate to one another, how individually and collectively you relate to God. That's where your energy needs to go, because those are the things that will sustain you, whatever you decide about where you live, where you work, how you play, how you do. None of that really typically matters all that much in the grand spiritual scheme of things. What matters is what's your relationship with the Lord and your collective relationship with your spouse and the Lord.
Yeah.
Because if you stress out about all this temporary stuff, it could be gone in an instant. Put your energy and your effort into trusting and following the Lord regardless, and trusting him with all your heart.
Yeah.
Because one of the things we've battled, I'll give two anecdotal things. I'm going to write myself a note to come back to this one. About Brenna, and I'm going to make myself a note so I don't forget what this is. We moved to Iowa one time a while back, and I went to work, and I needed a job. I was working at a church, but it was part-time. I needed a job. So I went into one of these temp agencies. You know, they have all these work, and they make you take all these dumb tests.
Yeah.
You know, can you turn a wrench? You have 3 minutes to put all these bolts together and put them in a board, and let's see how your physical acumen is. All these tests. I did all that, and then they take your results and they give you this smorgasbord of, here's all the jobs we have that fit your profile. You know, look them over, see which ones you want. And I said, I want the one that pays the most and starts the soonest. And she says, well, we want to make sure we fit you with the right job. And I said, ma'am, I've got 2 children at home that are hungry. The right job is the one I can start today or tomorrow and pays more than the others. That's the right one. And we went back and forth like that. And she said, well, I've got these 2. These are the 2. And I said, which one pays more and has an earlier start date? This one. I'll take it. And I started work the next morning. And part of that was just trusting the Lord. I was like, the specifics of how it worked out, I really didn't care about. What I cared about was the core function, putting bread on the table. That's the same idea that we have to take to making decisions now. Is the particulars often don't matter as much as the core function. Guys, you need to go provide for your family as best you can. That's the core function. How you do that? Knock yourself out. Ladies, men too, whoever. Let me back up. That was a dichotomy I don't want to do in. Parents, you have to care for and love your children. You're going to do that differently than your neighbors.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to have different things that you enjoy. It's not about right or wrong. I hear people say, and that's temporal stuff. I hear people all the time, though, they're expecting babies. And I used to do this too before Brenna was born. They'll say, oh, you want a boy or a girl? What do they always say? You want a boy or a girl? And people always say what?
Whichever one, or a healthy one.
As long as, I don't care if it's a boy or a girl, so long as it's healthy. And I'm here to tell you that's even a short-sighted way to look at it.
Sure it is.
I didn't think that way until my baby was born unhealthy.
Yeah.
It's presumptuous. Because what I usually return with that is, so if they're unhealthy, you're not okay? Oh, no, that's not what I mean. And I know that's not what you mean. But we tend to live out what we say.
Yeah.
And if we get our mind caught in this place, because what that really is I have defined a way that I think the path is supposed to be straight.
Yes.
Long as my baby's healthy, everything's going to be fine. Well, if that's really where you set up your hope and your future and all that, what are you going to do when you get the deal from the sonogram and that baby's not okay? I remember that day.
Yeah.
Going out to the car and realizing this thing's coming off the rails. And I was in that mindset of as long as she's healthy, that's whatever it matters. Well, that's gone. Now what? Now you're left with really trusting the Lord. And
you'll also go through emotions like, what have I done wrong? How did this happen? How did I do that? What? And
oh yeah,
you know what? I would tell you, that's one of the ways that God starts changing the path, is making you have to come face to face with all the things that you think you know. You don't even know you think you know them until they're staring you in the face like that. And now what are you going to do? That, it may not seem right and it might not seem fair, because a lot of our culture, especially for the evil side of the equation, oh, that's not their fault, or no, we don't need to put any exert pressures and yada, yada, yada. And maybe that's true. Maybe it's not for a practical way of dealing with it. But in terms of kingdom, the way the kingdom, or at least in my experience, how the kingdom does things, by your own hand or by external hand, man, you'll start questioning yourself like crazy. And all of it's based on how you think things work.
It is. Well, then, and it's just like even with Brenna, we'd already had 3 kids. We were experienced parents at this point. I know how this is supposed to go. And we know what this is going to be like. Well, we got the monkey wrench of all monkey wrenches, you know?
Yeah.
And you don't think I didn't drive down in the back pasture and shake my fist towards the heavens and be like, I've done everything you've asked me to do. Why'd you deal me this hand?
Yeah.
I love her, but golly, this is going to be rough. And there were times where I felt like Job when the Lord was looking at him and going, tell me where you were when I told the sea how to go?
Yeah.
When I put the goats on top of the mountain, where were you at? And it was just a reminder that you think you know what the straight path looks like, but you don't have a clue.
Well, you second guess your relationship with God.
Yeah, you do.
What do you mean this isn't going to work out that way? That's the path. And remember, we're limited.
And the flip side of that, okay, so we got to bring it home. We'll shut it down, but the flip side of that is by intention and discipline through the power of the Holy Spirit, even ahead of time saying, you know what? I don't know what this is going to look like. I know what I wanted to, and it's okay to say, here's what I want. Nevertheless, what did Jesus do in the garden? Let this cup pass from me. He asked for what he wanted. He didn't want to go the path that made everything straight. He was God incarnate, and he wanted to do something different. But that phrase, nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. That's how you make decisions in a marriage. You pray about it. You seek God's wisdom. James 1:5 is one of the verses we were going to read. If you lack wisdom, pray and ask for it, and he will give it. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean he'll give you A or B.
Yes.
He might, but what it may just be is he gives you, trust me. Pick one and trust me.
And that seems ambiguous. Obviously, we're not walking in the kingdom if it's ambiguous of everything we're running into and how it is. It's ambiguous to me and you, but it's not ambiguous to him. That's a learned thing. I'm not saying that as an academic statement. I'm saying that's something that I work with all the time.
Well, I think and we have scripture reference where he's designed it that way a lot of times. He told,
I think it's designed that way.
What did he tell, what's his name? Get up and go to a place that I'll show you. Abraham.
Yes.
Get up and go to a place that I'll show you. Where are we going? We're not having that part of the discussion yet, Abe. I said, get up and go to a place that I'll show you. Trust me. You read the story of Job, it's the same thing. He had those conversations. What's going on, Lord? And he's not giving him any answers because the answer to the immediate situation is not the most important thing. Yeah. The most important thing is keeping our eyes on Christ. That is the paramount thing in making decisions as a family, as a couple. A lot of times, God gives us the latitude and the freedom to make earthly, temporal decisions. Do your best to make you one that honors the Lord and trust Him with the path. At the same time, I would say it's definitely okay to say, Lord, I want to do this way. But if you'd like me to do the other one, give me that wisdom, lead me in a direction, close a door for me over here because I'm uncertain. Or if you're giving me latitude, give me peace about that. I believe that's where that wisdom comes in, is He will grant us the ability to trust Him in our decisions, even when He's not giving us the answer to the decision.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, though, as a married couple, we've got to be in a position where we're like, regardless of what decision we make and regardless of how it comes out, because you know what? You might make a bad, not the wrong one, you might make a bad decision. And then you got to learn from the bad decision.
Yeah.
But you decide and agree ahead of time before God, regardless of how this goes, we're going to go in good faith and we're going to trust God. And if it blows up in our face, we're still going to believe He's good and we're going to see what we have to learn from it and we'll do better next time. That's how you make good decisions. Now, oh, Matt, have you always made good decisions with your wife? No, not even this week. You know, I mean, it's a process. We are not yet into the full image of God. That's part of the already not yet.
Yeah,
we are empowered by the Spirit. We are a new creature, but we still have this promise in these earthen vessels. And He's making us into His image. And part of me is like, why can't you just make us into your image when we get saved? And that's just it.
Yeah.
Because we have forgotten somewhere down the line to teach each other that there's value in the process.
Yeah.
It's the process a lot of times that matters, not the outcome, in terms of the temporal things and the earthly stuff. The outcome of knowing Him. What did Paul say? I want to know Him, the power of His resurrection, the fellowship of His suffering. Even the suffering didn't matter. It was the outcome of knowing who Jesus was that mattered.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, how do you make big decisions in a marriage, trusting God together? You better determine to trust Him with your souls, with your lives together before you ever try to make decisions.
And one day your trust may be bigger than your spouse's.
That's right. And you're going to have to ask them to trust you.
And well, that's how it works in our house, because I'll either pipe up and go, I have no clue. I mean, I'm doing the best I can, and I believe that the Lord's going to lead us however He's going to lead us, and He's going to get it there. And then in some other scenario or situation, it's the other way around. It happens. So
yeah.
My point is that you use each other to help keep your eyes going in the right direction.
Well, I've always told Tammy this: when she's okay, I'm okay. What I haven't realized a lot of times is that puts a lot of pressure on her. Yeah. But the reality of it is, I feed off of her faith. Yeah. She has the gift, the spiritual gift of faith. Yeah. And when I see the Holy Spirit working out in her spiritual gift, it empowers and emboldens me to do the same. I have other spiritual gifts that have a similar effect on her. So as you approach making these decisions together, the primary thing is that you're both together looking into the face of God and saying, hey, we're going to do the best we can here to honor you, to do what's right, to be holy and righteous before you, and make this decision. Lay it out to Him. Hey, I've got these decisions in front of me. And I would say even do the work to go, what do you want to do, man? What decision do you want to make? Ask Him for it. Yeah. Ask Him for wisdom.
Oh, yeah.
You know, He may or may not give you that clarity. But if your heart is perfect towards the Lord, 2 Chronicles 16:9, and you are pursuing Him in those things, there's a promise in there. When He sees that heart, He will show Himself strong. It doesn't mean that He's going to give you necessarily everything that you ask for, but He will strengthen you in your decision.
Oh.
And He'll make that path straight, whatever path it is.
Take the part of it out, what He's going to do for you.
Yeah.
Well, He's going to show Himself strong through the perfect heart.
Yeah.
That may go against your nature sometime.
Yeah. But it's not about us.
Ask David that question.
Yeah. But it's not about us. It's about Him. Appreciate y'all. If y'all were watching out there today, or if you see this, share the podcast, make a comment, say hello. We'd love to hear that you're out there. If you want to hear us talk about something, send us an email. Where's my email button? Ba-doop, badoop. Send us an email. And, of course, my emails are not working. Why is that not working?
Man, it's delayed.
There it is. Yeah, it is. I hit it like 8 times now. Send us an email. We'd love to do it. Make a comment on the line. We'll get that. Appreciate you coming back every week. Love you guys. You got anything else? All right. Y'all have a good one. Talk to you later.